Okay, so today we are going to discuss, personal productivity and a few of the things, and I wish I could say I was an expert at productivity, but just like so many of you, I juggle the hats that I wear. And so I have to be very intentional with how I structure my time, especially this year. And so I am going to highlight a few things that I find helpful professionally and personally. And so, three of the objectives we're going to cover in this session is how to rethink time as a commodity, as one of those valuables that are just as expendable as our money, as our energy. But time is also an important commodity that we only have a finite amount of. Then we'll talk about strategies to boost your personal productivity, and then also ways to kind of practice strategic professional self care. I know that's been a big theme of this series because it's hard to pour from an empty cup. And I saw a meme yesterday about how self care is giving the world the best of you instead of what's left of you. And I think we're so accustomed to giving everybody what's left of us that we don't even know what the best of us looks like anymore. And I'm sure you can relate to this professional on this hamster wheel, because when we don't make good use of our time, we can feel like we're in that rat race, that hamster wheel rat race. Right. Okay, so, and you can respond in the chat. Anybody relate to the fella in this picture? So this has been a work year like none other. And so some of you, definitely the last chat is the dog, the kids, having to manage. I'm working from home now. Some days I'm in the office. Many days I am still at home. And so this notion of what does work-life balance look like in this pandemic? What will it look like moving forward? How do you be productive when you have so much vying for your time? And so one of those things is kind of seeing time as a commodity, that we have a finite number of hours in a day, minutes in a day, and in a week, and in our year that we are evaluated on, many of us who get annual performance reviews. And so time is expendable. And so you're going to hear me kind of talking from two positions today. And I included this in my introduction, but kind of the position of family resource management. And so, whether you are in charge of managing the resources for your family or just yourself or a combination of both, but how we can manage our time, but also from the position of a family therapist. And so my background is a family therapist. And so you will hear me kind of, consider this as part of your overall wellness. Because when we use well what we have, it helps us operate from that position of better instead of position of deficit. So like this clock here, these trash can full of clocks here, we can waste time so very easily. And it is not hard to do when even it can be a means of procrastination sometimes, that we can waste time procrastinating instead of doing our work. And one of a good way to begin, whether I'm going to talk mostly about professional tips for increasing your productivity today, but one just across the board tip is to simplify your life. And so, look for ways that you can take some of that stress off of your plate, work harder, and smarter, not harder. So outsourcing what we can. And so outsourcing might look like, paying someone to clean your house, or a service that I love to use is grocery pickup, online pickup. And so, using that service instead of spending an hour and a half at the grocery store, I might put items or meal plan into my grocery cart at night if I'm watching a show or kind of trying to decompress, and then do a grocery pickup on my way home, or have my husband stop by and get groceries. Maybe it is paying a child. If you have a neighbor in your neighborhood who can mow your lawn or who can babysit your kids, or if you have an older child who you can outsource and begin to develop their sense of responsibility by helping delegate and take some of this stuff off of your plate. But what can you outsource? What can you automate? If it's bill pay, if it's calendar notifications, how can you use some of those resources? And technology can kind of it can be a helpful thing or a hindrance, because I'm like some of you I saw in the chat, sometimes too many platforms can be a bad thing. But how can you make some of those that are helpful for you work for you? Communicate. How can you get everybody on the same page? And so if you have a household that consists of more than just you, it doesn't help if you are organized, but everyone else isn't. And so you, again, feel like that hamster wheel. And so how can you communicate better to the people in your household? This may look like a command center in your kitchen or on your way out the door or in your mudroom. In our house, it looks like a synced family calendar. Even my 11-year-old and my 13-year-old are 14. She turned 14 on Friday. But we have a family calendar where they see the things that I put on the calendar as well. It really helps my husband and I communicate so that we're not planning over top of each other. Planning ahead, this is very important with things like meal planning and prepping for your next day. And then consolidating tasks where you can. So kind of using those simple life hacks like pre-prepped meals, salad bags, and things, chopped veggies, and but what things can you kind of consolidate so that you can simplify? Because you are more productive when there is less on your plate. And then the 1-minute rule and the 5-minute rule. 1-minute rule is that if you can do it in 1 minute or less, just do it. If that's tidying up something as you go, if it's responding to a quick email, if it is accepting a quick calendar invite, but if it takes a minute or less, just go ahead and do it. And the 5-minute rule. So if you are stuck on a project, give yourself 5 minutes of every hour to get it done. Or if you get out of this Zoom, say you're in an hour Zoom and they usually wrap up maybe a few minutes before the hour, give yourself that last 5 minutes of that hour to tackle emails, to work on a project, to tidy your office, to revamp your calendar. But what can you do in small tasks? Because when we see time as a commodity, we can begin to see time as an investment. And, when we're intentional about how we invest our time, that's when we're going to see the greatest return on our investment. And at the heart of productivity is developing routines. And so when we develop a routine for how we begin our day, how we end our day, how we structure our hours, we can it triggers cues in our mind. It triggers these neural pathways to help us become more productive. And so a routine is just simply, any kind of behavior or pattern of behaviors and action that has that intentionality to it. And so if any of you on this call are parents, like, you could probably speak to the importance of routines, especially with babies and young children, and how important it is to establish a routine for them, and then how difficult it is when that routine is disrupted. So if the child is sick, or if you go out of town for a day, or something that disrupts that sleep pattern, and it's tough, and you see that in the child. And so it can be the same thing in terms of the adult. When we don't have defined routines, our brains and our body experience that same level of chaos that a young child would. And so, in establishing routines is at the heart of beginning to develop some of those disciplines that helps you be more productive. And so in our personal lives, sleeping, eating, and exercising are 3 that research says are the most important to establish good sleep patterns, because we're more productive the next day if we have slept well, and then eating patterns and exercising. Well, for professionals, some routines to consider establishing are these 4 P's that I have down here: prep routines, production routines, pause routines, and play routines. And these help contribute to that overall sense of work-life balance. And so prep routines are simply that. What can you do to prep yourself to be successful your next day at work? And so usually these will be kind of what you do at the end of your business day or the night before, or kind of in those hours. It may be thinking through what you're going to wear the next day. Now, if you've got on yoga pants like me right now, from the waist down, it hasn't been that big of an issue with COVID, but on my days that I go into campus, I think through those things the night before, packing my campus bag, thinking through a lunch bag and what I'm going to pack for it, laying out my clothes, getting stuff ready for my kids the night before, anything that I can do to prep myself for the next day. I also do this with my email. So when I am closing up my day, I do a quick swipe of my email. I will do a quick overview of my desk and make sure that things are in order so that I can hit the ground running the next day. And I typically, before I kind of shut down social media for the night, I will look at my calendar again, shift around tasks that I may be putting on the next day's to-do list, and then just really prepping myself. So this is a category to prioritize, is your prep. Then the next are your production routines. And so what routines can you establish in your day to help you be the most productive? And we're going to talk about those in some of the upcoming slides. But things like blocking time on your calendar, stacking meetings, batching your time and similar tasks together. But what productive routines can you establish so that you're kind of not all over the place, but that you are intentional with your time? But it's also important to have routines for pausing. And so when are you getting a cup of coffee? When are you stretching? When are you clearing your mind, going for a walk, getting fresh air, chatting with a colleague? But again, so they are not disruptive to your day, but they are intentionally built in to free your mind, to allow you to pause, to come back to a task more creative. But what do those look like? Again, I like to give myself 5 minutes at the end of an hour to get things done, to go to the restroom, to refill a water bottle, that kind of thing, to get myself away from my computer, away from a Zoom, away from my desk or my office. But what do your pause routines look like? And then finally, what do your play routines look like? I think probably this year more than ever before, there's been things vying for our time, and there's been this blending of personal and professional lives. And so how can you kind of distinguish between those times and say, I'm not going to check my email after 5. I'm not going to begin answering emails before 8. I'm not going to work on the weekends. And so sometimes, that can get, you can adjust that if a deadline demands or your schedule demands, but making sure that you're taking time to connect with your family, to refuel yourself, to have that self-care. So those are 4 important routines as a professional to develop. All right, and so, we have a curriculum here on personal productivity with cooperative extension. And, one of the questions that I get asked is, what is the secret of successful time management? And like the secret of being healthy and the secret of, being fit or being successful at work is there's no secret. It takes discipline. There is often not a one-size-fits-all model, but it takes figuring out what works best for you, knowing yourself. So if technology is a trigger for you, then you might not, an app might not be very helpful to help you manage your time. The same thing, if notes aren't great for you, then don't write your stuff down in a notebook. So it takes intentionality, it takes discipline, and the secret is there is no secret. You really just have to find a method that works for yourself. And that comes back to establishing routines, tracking your progress, and then adjusting things as necessary. If you don't do this already, blocking your days, and you may not be able to block a whole day each week, but blocking large chunks of time so that you can work with minimal interruptions. Now, I did my doctoral work here at UK a decade ago, and I was so fortunate to come back and join the faculty 10 years later. So my family and I moved back this past July in the middle of the pandemic. I have 3 children. So I have a 14-year-old, an 11-year-old, and an almost 4-year-old. And then they were all home with me. They are still all home with me. And so in this fall, as I was adjusting to a new job and kids who were all of a sudden virtual learning and a preschooler who I did not have a daycare slot for, I had to rethink my productivity. And the fall wasn't very successful for me in terms of, maximizing my time. Like many of you, it was just kind of survival of the fittest. It's just how I felt most days. And so going into the spring semester, I vowed over Christmas that I was going to analyze and assess what was working well for me and what wasn't. And so I had to ask myself, well, what was really impeding my time? Because some of the stuff I just had to deal with, and it won't always be there. I am so happy to report everybody has a physical back to school spot this fall. And so I know it's just a short season, but I still need to maximize my time during this season. And I realized that I was spending way too much time on Zoom meetings, on meetings with students, colleagues, extension colleagues, and my Zooms were all over the place. And my Zooms really zapped me. It kept me from being productive. And so one thing I've been intentional with this semester is I don't schedule myself on Mondays unless, like today, I have a good reason to schedule myself. But as far as it's in my control, I don't schedule myself on Mondays and Tuesdays if I can help it, so that I start my week without any interruptions, that I'm not worried about getting online for a Zoom, that I am worried about tackling my projects and setting my week up for success. And that alone has made such a big difference in my schedule. So stacking meetings, and then if you're leading a meeting, creating an agenda, sharing that agenda, and prioritizing it so that you can stick to the time frame. And that's important. And if you're just attending a meeting, giving yourself permission, unless, perhaps it's with your supervisor, but giving yourself permission to get off at the end of that scheduled meeting, even if it runs late. So respecting the time boundaries that you have set. And then, kind of the same thing, figuring out what works well for you and doing more of that. So on your most productive days, what made that day really productive? And then on your least productive days, kind of figuring out what can you tweak, what didn't work so well, doing something differently. All right, so when I was prepping these slides last week, I decided to stop what I was doing and just take a picture of my, work from home in real life workspace. And so I am in an alcove right now in my upstairs because that was the best work from home solution I had. And we'll talk about setting up your workspace in just a moment. But so I'm in an L-shaped desk, and so a couple of the things I put in place for me this spring that have helped my productivity are a visible calendar. And so to my left on this desk is this calendar. I went to like Home Goods. I didn't spend a lot on it. You don't have to, you don't have to adopt Container Store or the Home Edit things to be productive and organized in your life. But you do need to develop systems that help you track your productivity. And so I needed to visually see what I had going on and kind of lay out my deadlines in advance. And so I have a little jar of Post-it notes in all sizes. I put my Zoom meetings on the narrow ones. I put them on my calendar, and that way when they are over, I can tear them off and throw them away. And so I put my task on bigger ones. I am a Disney lover. So I have a fun little Mary Poppins, in every job that must be done, there is an element of fun. But I have things around me that kind of inspire my creativity, that create a workspace that I want to work in. Now, to the right of my computer, I also have a whiteboard, a magnet board. Now, I didn't clean this off before I took a picture. This was what was on my workspace last Wednesday or Thursday. I have a almost 4-year-old who's learning to write his name. His name is Asher, and he loves, if I erase this, he will tell me his name is not on my board and he needs to add it back. That's okay, because I think that a mistake I have made in my productivity in the past that leads to burnout is ignoring or minimizing one of the hats that I wear. And for me, one of those hats is being a mother. And so, when I see things like my 3-year-old's name written on my board, it kind of helps to ground me um, in my productivity and what's important and why I do what I do and why I work is because, things that are important, providing for my family is one of those. So I use both of those systems, but I also use it in conjunction with computerized systems. So syncing my iPhone calendar and my Outlook calendar, and then having a system for those work commitments, for those deadlines and tasks, for the family, and that calendar is synced across the board. And then for like personal things that I want to accomplish. And so for me, this combination works. I can leave myself notes on the whiteboard, but I have to have a system. For me, I need to see it in about 3 different places so I don't ignore it. Oh, so in real life is RL, and work from home are those acronyms, Cheryl. So these were my pictures in real life, work from home. And I have similar things set up for me in my campus office. But right now the work from home for me is my in real life. Okay, so some of those quick tips for boosting productivity: batching and sequencing your activities. And so one of the things, and you guys mentioned this when we were kind of warming up the conversation, that the email sinkhole is a deep one. And that is research support. So that is one of the biggest impediments of productivity. And so, looking at blocking yourself, if it's 5 minutes of every hour, if it's the first hour of your day, the last hour of your day, and probably not a whole hour, but what works best for your schedule, but not allowing yourself to respond to email during other times. Because if we are trying to be productive on a project and we are constantly minimizing that or responding to the notifications on our screen when something else comes in, it thwarts those neural pathways in our brain, and it redirects our mental energy and our mental capacity in a different direction. And so muting your notifications on, unless it's for a meeting. So like Azetta and I were talking about, so you don't get so in the zone that you ignore other deadlines, but that you really make it intentional when you respond back to your email. And if you're working on a project, not letting yourself get distracted by those. Emails can wait, and they can wait until you work them in to your calendar. And the same thing with social media. And so if you're constantly on social media throughout the day, and it's probably a bigger time suck than you realize. And so, and the same thing, social media may be the same as running into that colleague in the hall or having those conversations that keep us from being our productive self when we are at work. And this year it might be a little bit of both, but when do you allow yourself to do that, but taking intentionality back of your time? And so if you like to socialize with colleagues, then perhaps work that into your pause time, your pause routines, and set a time to go on a walk with a colleague outside, get some fresh air, but make it intentional so that it is not taking away from your productivity. And then again, tracking your task. And so like for me, the calendars, and I have several different ways to track my task, but I also check in throughout the day. Usually for me, I check in at the end of the day and cross things off the to-do list, because it's not in our mind. Intense satisfaction comes from crossing things off of our to-do list, whether it's deleting something on your electronic calendar, whether it is crossing something off of a physical calendar, removing a post-it note on an office calendar. But it helps to spur on our momentum when we show that we're doing something, because sometimes we can feel like we're not really getting anything done. But when we can celebrate small successes by crossing something off, however you do that, it can help to boost our productivity. So that's not all in your mind. Now, electronic solutions, if that works for you, do it. If it doesn't work for you, don't do it. And but if you take time to Learn your platform like Outlook. So if you're an Outlook user, take the time to learn the features that it has that can help track your tasks. Or the same thing with your phone calendar, or if you have a smartwatch or if you have an app. Learning the features of those can help you use them effectively. And then updating regularly so that you can stay on top of those tasks. And so several of you may have seen this. And so priorities and prioritizing was something that came up in the chat when we started. But this is the Eisenhower matrix. And so this was, has its origins in how, former President Eisenhower, how he managed his task. But along this continuum of urgent and important. And so if something is urgent and important, then do it now. And so like if you are ever feeling overwhelmed with your task or looking for a place to dive in, learning to better prioritize what you need to do is a great place to begin. So urgent and important, do it now. Important and not urgent, do it next. So it's important that you accomplish that goal. There's not a firm or hard deadline. You do that after you get that first quadrant done. So this bottom left quadrant, the urgent, not important. Those are those things that you really need to either stop saying yes to. Those are those time zaps. Things that you really possibly can delegate. And so if you have a team member, if you're as part of a team, if you're managing graduate students, if you are doing something that you can delegate things to somebody else. So this third quadrant, that urgent, not important, those are those things that are not helping you achieve your personal goals, but are taking up, quite a bit of your time. And then if it's not urgent and not important, you really need to just avoid those tasks. And so take a look at the things that aren't getting you anywhere on your personal goals, your professional goals, that are taking up your time. And this might be some of those life simplification tasks that you can do. So using that. And, it goes without saying, but deconstructing tasks into manageable parts. And so the snowball momentum is important. So doing something small. So for example, if I'm planning a presentation, if I'm planning a PowerPoint, I will begin with the things that I can easily fill in, or I'll do something. I like to use graphics in mine. And so I'll plan out the graphics that help me drill down the facts that I want to convey, because that's kind of a mindless task. Picking out graphics doesn't take a lot of skill, but it does help me get in a rhythm of thinking. And it's a small task, but it can build momentum. Again, delegation. Delegation is one of those things that is easier said than done. And, can you delegate parts of a task to another team member so that you can focus on what is urgent and what is important and what requires your skill set? But then, of course, allowing flexibility for people and problems, because they come up. And that's one of the reasons why many professionals don't delegate more, because you don't have that sense of control that a task is going to be done correctly. But so allowing for flexibility, but letting people help you out and take things off of your shoulders. And then a good tip that I was told once is that when you're juggling a lot of balls, you have to figure out which ones are glass and which ones are rubber. And so which balls, if they fall, will break, and that will affect you, will affect your working relationships, will have major consequences. But which balls are rubber? Which balls can you let fall and they'll bounce back, and you can, work them into the shuffle at your convenience? And so I would encourage you, if you are looking to be more productive, that you figure out what are those hard deadlines and what are not, and how can you stop stressing yourself out about rubber balls. And then of course, if you are not scheduling goals and setting goals for yourself, then you're probably not getting a whole lot done. Research suggests that only about 3% of working adults have their goals clearly defined, and they have a written or actualized plan for accomplishing them. And so, of course, SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So they are defined well. You know how you can achieve them. They are possible. They're positive goals. They're one that are going to encourage you to, pursue your dreams, to kind of become your best self. They mean something to you, so you have a vested interest in doing well and getting them done. They are possible, so you have it within your skill set to achieve the goals that you set. They are prioritized, and we're going to talk about some procrastination tips in a couple of slides. And they are promised. This helps me. So if I have a goal, committing to something helps keep me from procrastinating or from keeping a task on my wish list, but I get it done when I have committed. So if I have committed to writing a curriculum, or if I've committed to giving a presentation, I am much more likely to do it because I'm not going to let somebody else down. And so, promised goals can help with that accountability so that you get things done. All right, so procrastination, why do we do it? And that is an important reason for tackling and precluding procrastination, is figuring out why or do you procrastinate. For me, I'm a procrastinator. I always have been, because I tend to work better under pressure. And so if I am working up against a deadline, I know in my mind, I've got to just do it. I have to do it. I can't mess around any longer. And so it gets me in trouble sometimes when I underestimate how long it's going to take me to do something. But I know that having that pressure makes me perform. So that's the reason I procrastinate. So let me ask you here in the chat, what are some reasons that you procrastinate? What are some reasons that you procrastinate? Anybody? Habit? Confident, yeah. Don't want to do it, don't like to do it. Not having a deadline. Yeah, not having a clear deadline, not knowing where to start. Yeah, absolutely. Procrastination can be a break, being tired, the task seems too big or it might take too long. Putting off one thing to do something else that may be more pending, having more important things to do, being overwhelmed. Yeah. And these are all reasons that, yes, research says, why are we procrastinating? So if there's no clear deadline, if there are inadequate resources available, so maybe you don't have the time, the money, the information, the funding, the help to get something done, it's easy to put off. If you don't know where to begin, if the task feels overwhelming, if you don't have passion to do the work, or if you fear failure, or you fear success. So some of that in academia, I know that we deal with imposter syndrome a lot. But research would suggest that one of the ways to stop procrastinating is to figure out why you are procrastinating. So if you are looking at this task that you are not getting it done, stop and ask yourself and reflect on, why are you procrastinating? And once you begin to identify that, you can then make a plan to circumvent that procrastination. And so here are some tips on the screen for ways to overcome it. And so, like, is this a task that you can delete? Does it even need to be done? Will it get you any closer to reaching your goal? Where is it on that quadrant of priorities? Is it something that can be delegated? Does it need your specific skill set? Will it benefit you? Maybe you just need to do it. You just need to sit down and do it now. And again, establishing a routine. And we'll come to that one in eating the frog. Sometimes you just have to sit aside and do it now. And when we postpone something, it creates feelings of anxiety with us because we know it's there. And so it creates additional stress when we put something off. If we don't know how to do something, maybe seeking advice of somebody, a colleague who has been there and done that, somebody who could shed advice on a task that seems overwhelming. Even sometimes just beginning a simple brainstorming conversation can get those wheels turning and can help kind of alleviate some of that mental fog that we may have. Breaking it down into smaller tasks. So what can you do? Making a list, and then there's a 15-minute rule with that. So try to make it into actionable steps. So I'm going to give myself 15 minutes to map it out. I'm going to consult with a colleague for 15 minutes. I'm going to look for other examples in research or on the internet, or in my network of how it's been done. Setting clear deadlines or getting those communicated. And so if it's a deadline you set yourself, or if it is one that a colleague agreeing in a team, if you're working on a team, giving yourself a team deadline so that you get it in your calendar and getting it done. And then setting those benchmarks, those check-in points, so that you can know that you're making progress, so that you can build your momentum. Rewarding yourself. And, like I took off on Friday. It was my daughter's birthday. We went to Keeneland. It was just wonderful. But even though I took off, in theory, I still had tasks that had to be done prior to Friday. And so it gave me motivation last week to work and to get some things checked off that I would have normally put off until Friday, because I had a light at the end of the tunnel and I gave myself permission to enjoy a reward for hard work. Removing distractions. If it's putting your phone away, silencing your email, not allowing yourself to get up for an hour, giving yourself some boundaries and working within them. And then this idea of eating the frog. And so this is this thing that you may not want to do it. It's something that you don't want to do at all. It feels overwhelming. It's not motivating. But if you go ahead and eat that nasty frog first thing in the morning, it can only go uphill from there. And if you have 2 frogs to eat, you eat the ugliest one first. And so it's this idea of disciplining yourself so that you always tackle your biggest thing first thing in the morning, and then you work in the little things. And so prioritizing your calendar so that you tackle your biggest, hardest, ugliest task first. And if you're stuck on it, that you do something that will help give you momentum. You step away, you take a pause, but you come back to it, that you don't keep putting it off. And if you can't eat the frog, you can break him into smaller parts, but it's going to be hard to swallow each time. Right, let's see. Okay, so the last couple of slides here is, kind of rethinking your workspace. And, I am a big proponent of your workspace, your home space is a reflection of what's going on in your life. And so if you have a cluttered mind, chances are you have a cluttered workspace, you have a cluttered living environment. And so how can you set up a workspace, whether at home or in the office, that can help be both comfortable for you and conducive for work? That it can reduce the clutter and can reduce the chaos so that you can focus. So whether you're in a beautiful office with a nice window, whether you're in a cubicle, how can you make that space your own so that you feel like working? And so, I have got both my office at home and on campus set up so that even though I am not going very regularly, I have prioritized setting that space up. So when I go there, it feels comfortable to work in. At home, I have done the same thing. And if you don't have a good pair of noise canceling earphones, earbuds, AirPods, whatever you need, I would suggest getting them, because your neighbor will cut the grass. There will be there may be kids yelling in the background. There may be a colleague next door on the loudest Zoom ever, and they are projecting their voice. Anything that can derail you will derail you. And so those are good things to have if you don't, because it can help you focus. And if you are trying to focus, you need to figure out what ways can help you focus, can help give you energy, So working where there's lots of good light, and what can bring you peace and calmness, because when we're anxious, we're just not going to focus very well. We're not going to do what we need to do. And so make sure that your workspace adheres to 5 senses. So sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. And so what are you looking at? Is it aesthetically pleasing, or is your desk piled high with papers? Is your bookshelf all unorganized? Are you staring at the dirty dishes in your kitchen sink if you're working from home? But are you doing more to contribute to your clutter and chaos, or to make it conducive for working? So what do you see? What do you hear? Again, if it's noise, drown it out. If you work well with music, put it on. There's a lot of research. And in fact, I think one of the upcoming sessions in this series is on the power of music, but music is really powerful to help us focus, to help us relax. And I use that most often either in my earbuds if others can hear me, or while I am working. But what do we smell? Smell is an important sense in calming us down and help boosting our productivity. If I'm at home, I might have a candle burning. If I'm in the office or at home, I'll have a diffuser going, so that I am putting out smells that calm me down, so that I can feel relaxed and motivate me. And turning on my diffuser, for example, is part of my routine that helps kind of signal it's time to work. What do you taste? So if you like coffee or water or a bowl of chocolates, what do you have there that can, again, help you calm down so that you can focus? And then, are you comfortable? Is your chair comfortable? What's touching you? Do you need to be cozy? Are you cold? Are you hot? But rethinking your workspace, because again, wellness is comprehensive and productivity is a part of our overall wellness. And so when our senses are satisfied, we are often more productive. All right. And so last here is, how can we kind of practice strategic professional self-care? And because work-life balance is real, and I still struggle. I struggle with superiors who encourage taking time off. And then I struggle with some who you take it off and you're kind of frowned upon. And that's unfortunate. But I think that it is important to give yourself permission to invest in yourself. Because again, it's hard to pour from an empty cup. And so I love horse country. I'm so glad to be back in Kentucky. And when I see the fences that are everywhere, the therapist in me is reminded of those boundaries that we're setting. And again, the horses have freedom, but boundaries help keep us safe, and it helps keep us, in terms of professionally, it keeps us sane. And so setting those boundaries are important, but then respecting those boundaries. So if you take a day off, don't check your email. Give yourself time to work, give yourself time to rest. Do things that fuel your craft. So go to conferences, tune into things that make you a better employee, a better specialist. Whatever it is that you do things that make you better. So you are cutting edge in your field, and that you, can stay abreast of, why you are doing what you're doing in the first place. And if you don't take off your day, and this is, it's important to do for anything, but especially in helping professions. Teaching is one of those, but anytime you're interacting with the public, it's so important to take off your day. So this might mean listening to certain music on your way home from work, or taking a longer route so that you give your mind time to shift between work and home. It might mean when you get home, changing your clothes. It is a simple cue, but it is an important one to give your body this cue to say, all right, I am off now. And it's important. If we don't have time off, we can't be really on. And so, and that's why some of those morning routines are important as well, is putting your day on. And so signaling those routines and those cues that allows you to be productive. And then also, knowing what to do when you're syncing. When we're syncing, there are 5 C's, and I think it's the last thing I'm going to cover. If you're your to-do list at work feels too big and you're beginning to feel overwhelmed and you're beginning to feel burnt out, stopping for a second, and the first C is calming yourself. Um, going for a walk, clearing your mind, calming yourself down, getting a coffee, taking a deep breath, but doing something to calm your nerves down. Then creating a list. So the second C is to create. So brain dumping everything that is stressing you out and making a list of what are those priorities, what are those urgent things, those important things that are weighing heavily on your mind. The next one is calendar. So it's taking that list that you create, assigning deadlines to it, putting it on your calendar, and then mapping it out. You may see that you have time in your day if you strategize correctly with putting them in your calendar. And then the fourth C is identifying those concerns. So what are the main concerns for today? And so, it is just looking at what's right ahead of you. What do you have to accomplish? Identifying maybe those top 3 concerns and then begin to create action steps for those. And then the fifth one is critical. What is most critical? Start with that. And so it is calming yourself, creating a list, getting it on your calendar, identifying your top concerns, and then beginning on the most critical item. And so it is, I'm going to leave you with this one, but the best way to get something done is to simply begin. And so my encouragement is always start small, start somewhere, and then build on that momentum. And that is, I will turn it over for questions.